You probably think you know the story of the iPhone, right? It's this brilliant device designed in California, slapped together in China. But that's just the surface. What we're about to get into is the real story. A 2-decade partnership that didn't just build a product, it completely reshaped technology and, honestly, global power as we know it. So a lot of what we're digging into today comes from some incredible reporting by the Financial Times' Patrick McGee in his book, Apple in China. He really got on the inside, talking to the key people, and he uncovered a story that is way more complex and, frankly, way more interesting than the simple headlines we're all used to.
Look, the story we always hear in the West, it isn't wrong. It's a story of factory suicides, grueling 16-hour workdays, and exploited labor. And all of that is tragically absolutely true. But it's missing the biggest piece of the puzzle. It's a profoundly incomplete picture of what was really going on.
And this is the key. The whole thing gets flipped on its head with this one idea. This wasn't just a simple case of exploitation. No, it was a strategic, symbiotic bargain. A calculated trade where both sides were using each other to achieve these monumental ambitions. To really get it, you have to understand what each side truly wanted out of the deal.
So let's look beyond the factory floor, right? Because this deal was never just about cheap labor. It was about what might be the single greatest transfer of technological and manufacturing know-how in modern history.
So what was the deal exactly? Well, on one side, Apple got the scale and efficiency it needed to become the most profitable company in the history of the world. But on the other side, China got a masterclass from the most demanding company on the planet. Apple literally sent its best and brightest engineers to teach automation, advanced engineering, and quality control. They effectively built China's high-tech supply chain from scratch.
But how did this perfect match even happen in the first place? Well, it was a perfect storm, really. It was a convergence of 3 crucial things: Apple's absolute desperation, a Taiwanese entrepreneur's ruthless ambition, and a very deliberate national strategy coming straight from Beijing.
So by the early 2000s, Apple was in a crisis. I mean, it was a good crisis to have, but a crisis nonetheless. The iPod was a runaway hit, and they simply could not make them fast enough. Their partner in Taiwan, Inventec, was literally overflowing with parts, stuffing boxes of components into stairwells and emergency exits. They needed a solution on a planetary scale, and they needed it like yesterday.
And this is where Terry Gou enters the picture. The founder of Foxconn was just absolutely relentless. He started his career molding plastic knobs for TVs and built a global empire on one simple principle: ruthless efficiency. He offered razor-thin margins and had access to a seemingly endless supply of determined, low-cost migrant workers. He was the only person on Earth who could solve Apple's massive problem.
But here's the thing, Terry Gou wasn't just operating in a vacuum. He was the perfect entrepreneur for China's Guangdong model. This was a huge national strategy where Beijing basically told local officials, do whatever it takes. Subsidize the land, build the roads, make sure there's a constant flow of workers. Anything to attract foreign giants like Apple and make China the undisputed workshop of the world. Okay, so the deal is struck. Apple gets its scale, China gets its education. But what were the consequences? The long-term fallout? Well, it's explosive. And to understand it, we've got to talk about something called the catfish effect.
First, you just have to appreciate how unbelievably successful this was for Apple. For years, the iPhone has had less than 20% of the global smartphone market in terms of units sold. Yet, it routinely pulls in over 80% of the entire industry's profits. That is an absolutely insane level of financial dominance.
Okay, but at the exact same time, look what was happening on the other side of the deal. While Apple was crushing the profit game, Chinese brands were winning the market share game. In 2013, they were less than a quarter of the market. By 2020, they were shipping more than half of all smartphones sold in the entire world. This shows you the result of that tech transfer in stark relief.
So how on earth did that happen? Well, it comes down to this really powerful metaphor, the catfish effect. The idea is, if you have a tank of sardines, they get lazy and they die. But if you throw a predator in there with them, a catfish, they're forced to stay active, to stay sharp, and to get stronger just to survive. In this story, Apple was the catfish. Its insane demands for quality and scale forced Chinese suppliers and rivals to innovate, to get better, and to eventually become world-class competitors themselves.
And the pressure to keep up with that catfish was just immense, and it had a very real human cost. For the engineers on both sides of the Pacific, the ones tasked with meeting Apple's relentless production schedules, 80-hour work weeks just became the norm.
It got so intense that Apple engineers developed this darkly funny name for the bonuses they'd get after a grueling production run in China. They called it the Divorce Avoidance Program. It was a $10,000 check meant to smooth things over back home because they were gone all the time under incredible stress. That's the kind of pressure that built this machine.
So that brings us to today, because the bargain that made Apple the most valuable company on Earth has also tangled it up in this incredibly complex web of dependencies and risks, and it's all coming to a head right now.
When you boil it all down, it looks like this. Apple is now profoundly dependent on its main geopolitical rival. The catfish effect works so well that its own student, Huawei, is now a massive competitor. The supply chain it spent 2 decades building is so sophisticated that trying to move it somewhere else, to decouple, is basically a fantasy. And to top it all off, its most critical component, the advanced chips, comes from Taiwan, one of the most volatile geopolitical flashpoints on the entire planet.
And that leaves us with this one final, really provocative question. The entire strategy that led to Apple's incredible success was to teach, train, and build up its partners in China. But in doing so, did it inadvertently create the very ecosystem that now poses the single greatest threat to its future? That's a question the whole world is waiting to see answered.